There are moments on live television that you cannot prepare for. Moments where the professional mask slips, not because someone forgot their role, but because what's happening in front of the cameras is simply too real, too raw, too human to contain behind a polished smile and a tidy talkback earpiece. And what unfolded on Good Morning Britain that morning was exactly that kind of moment. The kind viewers don't scroll past. The kind that makes you put your phone down, sit forward, and just watch. Ben Shephard is not someone who breaks easily on air. That's not a criticism. It's actually one of the things that makes him such a steady presence on that sofa. He's warm, he's professional, he's the sort of presenter who can steer an emotional interview without losing the thread, who can hold space for a guest's pain without collapsing into it himself. So when viewers notice something shift in his expression, a stillness, a tightening around his eyes, that particular kind of quiet that happens when a person is actively trying to hold themselves together, it stopped people. It genuinely stopped them. Because Ben Shephard doesn't do that. And yet, there he was. Annie had been speaking for only a few minutes at that point. But there's something about the way certain people carry their stories, not dramatically, not performing grief for an audience, but quietly, carefully, like they've been holding this particular weight for a very long time, and are only just now setting it down in public, that reaches through the screen and lands somewhere deep. And Annie's words did exactly that. You could feel it in the studio. You could feel it watching from home. The kind of television moment that makes you forget you're watching television at all. What made it so striking wasn't volume. It wasn't a sudden breakdown or a moment of theatrical confession. It was the opposite, actually. It was the restraint. It was Annie speaking about her health with this particular kind of quiet honesty that people who've genuinely been through something difficult often have, not embellished, not edited for impact, just true. And truth, when it arrives on live television without warning, has a weight that even the most carefully produced segment cannot manufacture. Viewers watching at home described feeling something shift in the atmosphere almost immediately. Those who follow Good Morning Britain regularly know that the program handles emotional content with a certain care. It's not a show that exploits pain for ratings, and the presenters are generally skilled at reading the room. But this felt different to a handle moment. This felt like something that surprised even the people sitting on that sofa. Something that arrived without a clear editorial direction, and in doing so, became something much more memorable than anything scripted could have been. Ben's reaction, that barely contained unmistakably emotional response, told viewers something important before Annie had even finished speaking. Because presenters with his experience don't react that way unless what they're hearing has genuinely moved them. There's no performance in that kind of stillness. There's no technique behind eyes that are clearly working hard not to fill. What viewers saw in Ben Shephard in that moment was a person, not a presenter, responding to another person's pain with the kind of empathy that doesn't ask for permission and doesn't arrive on cue. And that's the thing about Good Morning Britain at its most powerful. When it stops being a program and starts being something closer to window, into real experience, real struggle, real human feeling, it reaches people in a way that goes far beyond entertainment. People aren't just watching anymore. They're witnessing something. And witnessing carries a different kind of weight entirely. Annie's health journey, from what she shared, has clearly not been a simple one. The details she offered weren't sensational. She wasn't seeking sympathy in the way that word is sometimes used dismissively, as though asking for understanding were something to be embarrassed about. She was simply being honest about what she had been through, and perhaps more importantly, what she was still going through. And there is a particular kind of courage in that, especially on live television, especially with cameras pointed directly at your face and millions of people watching from their sofas before 9 in the morning. What viewers seemed to respond to most strongly, and you could see this reflected in the online conversation almost immediately after the segment aired, was the sense that Annie wasn't pretending. She wasn't wrapping her experience in reassuring language to make other people comfortable. She was sitting with the difficulty of it, naming it, and allowing that difficulty to simply be what it was. For anyone watching who has navigated their own health struggles, and that is, frankly, a significant portion of any morning television audience, that honesty lands differently than any polished narrative of recovery ever could. There's also something worth noting about the specific dynamic between Ben and Annie in that moment. These are people who have spent real time working alongside each other, who know each other's rhythms, who have likely shared more than a few quiet conversations off camera about what life actually looks like behind the professional front. And when you know someone really know them, not just professionally know them, hearing them speak openly about vulnerability in front of millions of people hits differently than if it were a stranger. You can see that in Ben. You can see the specific quality of his emotion, which isn't just sympathetic feeling toward a guest, but something closer to what you feel when someone you genuinely care about admits they've been struggling more than you knew. That distinction matters, because it changes the texture of the moment entirely. This wasn't a presenter responding to a difficult interview subject. This was a human being responding to a friend. And audiences, even watching from home, even without knowing the full context of their relationship, can feel that difference. Emotional authenticity has a particular quality on screen that is almost impossible to fake and immediately recognizable when it's real. And what was real in that studio that morning was unmistakable. Some people watching may have found themselves unexpectedly emotional too. That's not an accident, and it's not manipulation. It's the natural response to witnessing genuine human connection through a screen. Television, at its most honest, acts as a kind of mirror, and when two people on that sofa are clearly moved by something real, it invites the audience into that realness, whether they were ready for it or not. Several viewers mentioned afterward being caught off guard by their own reaction, not expecting to feel as much as they did, not having anticipated that a Tuesday morning news program would ask that much of them emotionally before most people had even finished their first cup of tea. And yet somehow, that's exactly what happened. It also raises a quieter question, one that the segment itself didn't necessarily answer, and perhaps wasn't meant to. Health struggles of the kind Annie described don't exist in isolation. They affect the people around you, the people who care about you, the colleagues who notice you're not quite yourself, but don't always know what to say. The people who sit next to you on a sofa on national television and hold their expressions steady even when everything in them wants to respond to what you're sharing with the full weight of the feeling it deserves. There's a certain kind of invisible effort in that. And Ben Shephard, whether he would describe it in these terms or not, was doing that work in plain sight of everyone watching. What lingers about moments like this, beyond the immediate emotional impact, is the conversation they start. Health, particularly when it's complicated, ongoing, not easily resolved, is still something that many people struggle to discuss openly. There are versions of the conversation that are socially acceptable and versions that make people uncomfortable. What Annie did by speaking honestly rather than strategically was to invite a different kind of conversation. One that doesn't smooth over the difficulty. One that doesn't promise a neat ending. One that simply says, this is what it's actually like. And here I am, still here, still talking about it, even though it's hard. That kind of public honesty matters more than it might initially appear. Because for every viewer watching who has felt that their own health struggles were somehow too messy, too ongoing, too unresolved to talk about, seeing someone speak about it on national television with this kind of straightforward dignity does something. It normalizes the conversation. It makes the difficulty feel less isolating. It says, without saying it directly, that you don't have to be on the other side of something to be allowed to speak about it. Good Morning Britain has hosted countless emotional interviews over the years, some more remembered than others, some that felt genuinely important, and others that, in retrospect, felt slightly manufactured. This one, whatever the complete picture of Annie's story is, didn't feel manufactured at all. It felt like something that happened rather than something that was planned. And those are the moments that stay. Those are the ones viewers replay. The ones they describe to someone who wasn't watching. The ones that make morning television feel, just briefly, like it matters in a way that goes beyond the daily news cycle. Ben Shephard's tears, barely restrained, unmistakably real, said something that words in that moment couldn't. They said that what was being shared deserved to be felt. That the person sharing it deserved to be seen. That sometimes the most honest response to someone else's pain is simply to let it reach you, without apology and without performance. And maybe that's why people are still talking about that moment now. Not because of any single dramatic revelation. Not because anything was resolved. But because for a few minutes on a Tuesday morning, in a brightly lit television studio, two people were completely, genuinely human with each other. And everyone watching felt it. What did you notice in that moment? Was it Ben's expression that stayed with you? Or was it something in the way Annie spoke? And do you think there's more to this story that we're only beginning to understand? Because something tells me this conversation is far from over.